There are moments in life when you realize that the ground you stand on is not as solid as you thought. Moments when you realize that the rules you follow do not apply equally to everyone. Moments when you realize that respect and dignity are not guaranteed, that there are privileges granted to some and denied to others based solely on the color of their skin. Evelyn Bird was about to experience one of those moments. Moreover, she was about to experience it in a deeply humiliating way. In late September, on a bright Friday morning, she stepped off the bus in front of Stonebrook Federal Bank. The sun warmed her face, a welcome warmth after 74 years of harsh winters. Her arthritis had flared up again, as it always did when the weather changed. Each step with her cane was a small struggle. But thinking of her granddaughter's bright face kept her going. "We're almost there, baby," she whispered to herself, pressing the manila folder tightly to her chest as if it contained something precious. There was something valuable inside. Scholarship documents, university housing deposit forms. There was a letter from the state university that began, "Congratulations, we are pleased to inform you that Evelyn had worked in the school cafeteria for 32 years. For 32 years she had served food to children, wiped tables, arrived before sunrise and left after sunset. She had raised 3 children on her cafeteria salary and her late husband's modest income from the post office. For 40 years, she had volunteered every Sunday at First Baptist Church. She had saved money in coffee tins and secret envelopes. And finally, 18 years ago, when her grandchild was born, she had opened a special savings account for this day. $4,000. Every penny honestly earned, carefully saved, set aside for one purpose: to give her grandchild the chance Evelyn herself had never had. The bank's glass doors slid open softly. Friday mornings were usually busy, and today was no exception. Customers formed a long line in front of the teller windows, young couples in business attire, an elderly white man in an expensive suit, impatiently glancing at his watch, a woman with 2 children quietly playing with their phones. It was a typical bank crowd. Evelyn shifted her weight away from her sore hip and moved to the end of the line. She tried to be patient, as she had been her whole life. The line moved slowly. 1 customer, 2, 3. Finally, a teller became available. "Next customer, please," said the young man in a white shirt wearing a name tag that read Ryan Keller. He looked like he had just graduated from college. His hands lacked the confidence that comes with experience. Evelyn stepped forward and flashed her warmest smile. "Good morning, young man," she said. She was being very sincere and polite. Ryan Keller didn't return the smile. His eyes darted around. He never looked Evelyn in the eye. "How can I help you?" he asked. But he wasn't sincere at all. He clearly didn't like Evelyn. "I'd like to withdraw some money, please," she said. Evelyn carefully placed her folder on the counter and opened it. $4,000 for my granddaughter's university dorm deposit. The deadline is Monday, and they want cash or a bank transfer." Ryan's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a large amount," he said. It wasn't a large amount. He was just trying to make things difficult for Evelyn. "Yes, I suppose so," Evelyn said, nodding pleasantly. "But the state university wants the deposit in cash or certified bank draft. I've been saving for this day since my granddaughter was born," she said. "I need to see your ID," Ryan said, his tone shifting slightly toward suspicion of the procedure. "Of course," she said. Evelyn reached into her purse with fingers stiff and unresponsive from arthritis. Suddenly tense under his watchful gaze, she fumbled with the zipper. Her purse was full: prescription pill boxes, tissues, receipts, hard candies wrapped in crumpled plastic. "Give me a minute. It's in here somewhere," she said. Ryan's posture stiffened. He glanced toward his boss's office, then back at Evelyn's hands rummaging through the bag. "Is there a problem?" he asked. He seemed to have seized his opportunity. "No, nothing's wrong," Evelyn said, finally finding her wallet under the tissue packet. "Here it is." She took out her driver's license and bank card, sliding them onto the counter with a slight tremor in her hands. Her hands were shaking badly from the minor panic attack she had just experienced. Ryan took her ID and examined it more closely than necessary. His eyes darted from the photo to her face and back again, as if trying to verify that the person in the photo was really her. Then he typed something into his computer and frowned at the screen. "Please wait a minute, Ms. Bird. I need to verify something with my manager," he said. Before Evelyn could respond, Ryan walked quickly toward a glass-walled office. There, a man wearing an expensive-looking suit sat reviewing documents. Frank Dillard. Evelyn had seen him during previous visits to the bank, but had never actually dealt with him directly. He was the kind of man who seemed to look through people, especially those who looked like Evelyn, rather than at them. In other words, he was the kind of dangerous person you kept your distance from. But Evelyn needed his help. Somehow she had to manage him. From behind the glass, she watched them talk. Ryan leaned over, pointing in her direction as he spoke quietly. Frank Dillard looked over Ryan, directly at Evelyn. There was something in that look that made her stomach clench, not surprise or concern, but something colder, something he had seen many times in his 74 years. A look that meant, "You don't belong here." Evelyn felt it clearly. It was a familiar feeling from the past. She had always fought people like this her whole life, but she no longer had the energy to fight. After a while, Frank stood up, deliberately straightened his tie slowly, and followed Ryan back to the counter. "Miss Bird," he said without extending his hand. His voice echoed so loudly in the bank lobby that everyone turned their heads. "You're trying to withdraw $4,000 in cash." Evelyn noticed how people were now looking at her. Her voice was low and dignified. "Yes, sir. It's for my granddaughter's university housing deposit," she replied. "Well, why do people like you suddenly need so much cash?" Frank asked without bothering to lower his voice. His words hit her like a slap. "People like you." She understood exactly what he meant. Evelyn knew what that meant all too well. "My granddaughter's university," she said briefly. Yes, Frank interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "Ryan will help you verify your account. We have procedures for large cash transactions, you understand." Frank turned away before she could respond, and Ryan stepped forward again, still unable to look her in the eye. "I need to do some additional verification on your account, Mrs. Bird. It won't take long," he said. Things had now gone beyond normal. They were making it as difficult as possible. It was as if they were testing Evelyn's nerves. But despite everything, she had to remain calm, because she needed that money. If it were for herself, she would have left without waiting a minute. But she had to be patient for her grandson. But instead of typing something into his computer, Ryan walked away toward the area behind the ticket windows. She watched him take his phone and turn his back to her. Evelyn stood alone in front of the ticket window, clutching the file containing her grandson's future, standing alone in front of the counter. The pain in her legs and hips faded into the background, replaced by a familiar feeling, the feeling of being invisible, judged before she could even speak, and found wanting. This time, that feeling truly hurt her. She had worked her entire life. She had served food for 32 years. She had volunteered at church every Sunday. She had raised her children. She had helped her grandchildren. She had paid her bills on time. She had never asked for charity. She had never caused trouble. And now, at 74, she was being treated like a criminal for trying to access her own money. Have you ever been treated like this? She looked around inside the bank. Other customers were being served without any problems. A young white couple was laughing with the teller as they deposited their checks. An elderly white man in business attire, a cup of coffee in hand, was being escorted to the loan officer's desk and was discussing the necessary conditions for expanding his business with relaxed cordiality. And he was standing there, waiting, as he had done so many times before. Through the large front windows, he saw movement in the parking lot. 2 police cars, lights off, had parked right in front of the entrance. His heart stopped for a moment. Of course they weren't there for him. He hadn't done anything wrong. The money was his. He had saved it dollar by dollar for 18 years. All the paperwork was in order. His ID was valid. But deep down he knew something was wrong. He felt a great unease. He was sure something had gone wrong. Frank came out of his office again and looked almost happily toward the front entrance. Ryan stayed behind, no longer even pretending to do his paperwork. Evelyn stood motionless, gripping the handle of her cane tightly with her white fingers. She hadn't done anything wrong. The money was hers. But when 2 police officers entered through the front door and casually placed their hands on their holsters, none of that mattered anymore. From this moment on, things would get much worse. It would be especially difficult for Evelyn. The bank suddenly fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The young couple at the next counter turned to look. Even the children playing with their phones looked up. Everyone was trying to analyze and understand what was happening. Officers Brent Maddox and Cliff Harland scanned the room with practiced efficiency. Their eyes quickly found Frank Dillard, and he gave Evelyn a slight nod. She wanted to speak. She wanted to explain. She wanted to show them the file containing her scholarship documents and the housing deposit letter from the university. But her mouth was dry, and that old familiar feeling that speaking would only make things worse enveloped her. Both police officers were eyeing Evelyn with the same suspicious glances. Evelyn stood right there. As a 74-year-old grandmother with arthritis who had worked hard all her life, she waited to see what would happen. She tried to prepare herself for what was coming. Outside in the parking lot, the deep roar of motorcycle engines broke the morning silence. A group of bikers pulled up next to the building housing the ATM. 4 motorcycles. 4 bikers wore patched leather vests, identifying them as members of the Hells Angels. There were 3 men and 1 woman. The woman's name was Red. She was 43 years old, 5'7", broad-shouldered, and a woman who had been toughened by years of riding motorcycles and maintaining her own bike. Her arms were covered in tattoos that told the stories of the roads she had traveled and the brothers she had lost. Why her jacket bore patches earned through her loyalty to the club and years of service. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her sharp, observant eyes missed very little. She had been riding motorcycles with the Hells Angels for 22 years. She started as a passenger, earned her patch, and became a full member at a time when women in motorcycle clubs still had to fight for respect. She had proven herself countless times. She was fearless but not reckless. She protected those who couldn't protect themselves. And she harbored a special hatred for bullies, especially those with badges. She was exactly the kind of woman Evelyn was looking for. She could easily empathize with Evelyn. Red stopped his bike and dismounted with practiced ease. His riding companions, Tinker, a woman in her 30s with mechanical hands and a sharp mind; Ghost, a tall, quiet man who had started riding motorcycles before Red was born; and Diesel, a large man whose size was inversely proportional to his naturally gentle nature, followed him. "Need cash," Ghost grumbled as he headed toward the ATM. Red followed him, his boots dragging heavily on the pavement. But something compelled him to peer inside the bank through the front windows. We could call it a strange feeling. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. An elderly black woman stood at the counter, clutching a file tightly to her chest. 2 police officers were approaching her from behind. Their movements, their stance, their positioning, their hunter-like focus. Red noticed it immediately, and it unsettled him. He felt he had to help Evelyn urgently. This wasn't a health check. This wasn't help. This was discrimination. "Stop," Red said quietly as he approached his friends. "Something's wrong there." Tinker followed his gaze. "Want to check it out?" he asked. Red was already moving toward the bank's entrance, his instincts screaming that something was wrong with what was about to happen to that old woman. Officer Maddox pushed open the glass doors the moment he reached Evelyn Bird. "Ma'am," Maddox said, his voice laced with a fake politeness that fooled no one. "We want you to step away from the counter," he ordered politely. Evelyn turned, her face a mix of shock and fear. "Officer, I don't understand. I'm just trying to withdraw money from my account," she replied. "Put your hands where I can see them," Maddox ordered, his voice sharpening. "Now," he added, a bit more harshly. Red stood just inside the entrance, her presence suddenly drawing attention. She was used to this. A woman wearing a Hells Angels jacket tended to attract people's attention. But she hadn't come here to cause trouble. She had come because the trouble had already started, and she had spent enough time watching people abuse their power. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She absolutely had to get involved. Get involved. She watched, she waited, and she prepared to act if necessary. Because Red had learned long ago that remaining silent in the face of injustice was a form of participation, and she was no longer participating. Officer Brent Maddox wasted no time. "Ma'am, we've received a report of suspicious activity," he said, his hand reaching for his duty belt. "I need to see your ID and have you explain what you're doing here." Evelyn's voice trembled slightly. "I want to withdraw money from my deceased husband's bank account for my grandchild's university housing deposit." "I'm trying to withdraw money from my own account for my grandchild's university housing deposit," she replied. "Your own account," Maddox repeated, his tone skeptical. He glanced at his partner, Officer Cliff Harland, standing behind him, mimicking his aggressive stance. "That's too much money for someone like you to withdraw," he sneered. As upset as Evelyn was by what she heard, there was nothing she could do. She tried to remain calm. "Someone like you." Same thing again. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "Officer, all my documents are here. The letter from the university, the deposit form, my bank statements." She tried to explain all the evidence to the officers. "I didn't ask for the documents," Maddox interrupted. "I asked what you were trying to do by trying to withdraw $4,000 in cash." "I told you, for my granddaughter," Evelyn replied. "You told me a story," Maddox said, approaching her. "Now I'm asking for the truth. Where did you really get this money? Who are you working with? What is the real purpose of withdrawing this money?" he asked. Things were escalating. Although it wasn't normally such a large amount of money, just like the other bank employees, this time the police officers were trying to pressure her. They had only one goal, and they made it clear. They just wanted to arrest Evelyn somehow. Evelyn's hands began to tremble. She hadn't done anything wrong, nothing. But as she was being interrogated like a criminal by 2 police officers, with the entire bank watching, the familiar weight of this treatment she had endured for decades was crushing her shoulders. "I earned it," she said quietly, as honorably as she could muster. "I worked in the school cafeteria for 32 years. I saved it for my grandchild. Every penny is legal and recorded in my account," she said. She suggested they examine the money movements in her account up to that point. That would prove the money was truly hers. But instead, the officers chose to arrest her. A moment later, Maddox's face hardened. "Turn around and put your hands on the counter," he ordered. "What? Why?" Evelyn stammered. "Turn around. Now," the police officer ordered again. Red had heard enough. He wanted to intervene somehow. He stepped forward, his boots making a heavy sound on the marble floor, drawing everyone's attention. "Excuse me, officers. What's the problem?" he asked. Maddox turned, narrowing his eyes when he saw the Hells Angels jacket. "This is none of your business. Back off," he replied. "I am concerned," Red said calmly. His voice reflected the authority he had gained from not being intimidated by anyone for 20 years. "This woman is clearly trying to conduct a banking transaction." "What's the problem?" he asked again. "The problem," Maddox said, his voice hardening, "is you interfering with a police investigation." "Back off," he warned once more. But Red had no intention of backing down. Red didn't budge. "What investigation? An old woman legally withdrawing money from her own account?" he asked. He was now advancing toward the police officers. His goal wasn't to cause trouble. He just wanted to help an old woman. "We have reason to believe this is suspicious activity," Harland said for the first time, his voice less confident than his partner's. "How is it suspicious?" Red asked. "Because she tried to withdraw her own money. That's what banks are for," he replied. Maddox took a step toward Red. "Listen, you motorcycle scumbag. I don't know how things work at that cheap bar you hang out at, but this is official police business. You can come willingly, or I can make you come. The choice is yours," he said, clearly threatening Red. This was unacceptable, and everyone in the bank heard it clearly. From this point on, there was no turning back. Red's expression didn't change, but something flashed in his eyes, a warning Maddox, in his arrogance, couldn't see. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll stand here and watch you do your job, to make sure it's done properly," he said. This was a good sign, otherwise Red could have intervened, and he was one of the first witnesses to the incident. "That sounds like a threat," said Maddox. "That sounds like civic participation," Red replied calmly. "I'm just watching law enforcement do their job as a concerned citizen. Isn't that my right?" he asked, posing a somewhat pointed question. His aim was to corner the officers a little. Maddox clenched his jaw. Red could tell from his posture that he wanted to escalate the situation. But they were in a public bank with cameras and witnesses, and Red was acting completely calm and rational. He couldn't justify removing him without making himself look worse. He knew that the slightest mistake or movement by Maddox would prove Red right. Both sides were moving carefully, making no mistakes. So he turned to Evelyn, who was still standing at the counter, clutching her file. "Ma'am, I won't ask you again. Turn around and put your hands on the counter," he said. "Officer, please," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to help my grandchild," she replied. "Turn around or I'll turn you around," Maddox said. Evelyn slowly, painfully turned toward the counter. Her arthritis made it difficult to move, and her cane fell to the floor. Red watched as Maddox grabbed Evelyn's right wrist and pulled her back. The old woman cried out in pain. "Slow down," Red yelled. "She's in her 70s. She has arthritis. You're hurting her," he warned Maddox. "She's resisting," Maddox said, pulling Evelyn's other arm back hard as well. "She's not resisting. She's in pain because of her arthritis," Red said. The metallic clink of the handcuffs echoed in the quiet bank. Evelyn was breathing heavily, tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from the intense physical pain of her arthritic joints being forced into place. Red pulled out his phone, but Maddox was quicker. "Put that phone down or you'll be arrested for obstructing my duty," he said. Red lowered his phone but didn't put it away. "I'm recording this. I have every legal right to record police officers performing their duties in a public place," he replied. "You're interfering," said Maddox. This was an obvious lie. He was looking for something so he could intervene with Red too. "I'm standing here with my phone. This is not interference, it's documentation," Red said, keeping his voice steady and professional. He had been in this situation before. "And you just handcuffed an elderly woman who was trying to conduct a legal banking transaction." "Yes, I'm documenting that," he added. Maddox's face flushed with anger, but he knew she was right. Recording the police in public places was legally protected, and he could probably find an excuse to arrest her too, but that would look very bad, and he knew it. So he didn't make any sudden moves toward Red. He knew she was acting wisely. Instead, he directed his anger at Evelyn. "Get out of the way," he said, pushing her toward the door. Evelyn, without her cane and with her hands cuffed behind her back, lost her balance and stumbled. Red instinctively stepped forward to steady her, but Harland blocked his path. "Don't touch her," he warned. "She'll fall," said Red. "Then let her fall. It's not your problem," said Harland. Red's hands clenched into fists, but he controlled himself. Getting arrested wouldn't help Evelyn. Being a witness would, so he had to control his temper. He could help from the outside. He had to act wisely. The bank had fallen completely silent. Customers were frozen, some pulling out their phones to record. Bank employees watched from behind the counters, their expressions ranging from shock to carefully guarded neutrality. Frank Dillard had retreated to his office, arms crossed, watching through the glass. He was thoroughly enjoying this. The situation was obvious, really. He had clearly had a pensioner arrested for trying to withdraw his normal pension, and he was proud of it. Maddox paraded Evelyn around the bank as if she were a dangerous criminal. "Walk, Grandma. You'll learn what happens when people like you try to commit fraud," he said. This arrest was now entering another phase. He was clearly humiliating her in front of everyone. They were clearly mocking her. "I'm not committing fraud," Evelyn said, her voice just above a whisper. "The money is mine," she replied. The officers would understand this later, but by then it would be too late. "Yes, we'll see that after we search your home and check your name in the system. I'm sure we'll find some interesting things," said the officer. Red followed them toward the exit, far enough away that they couldn't claim he was interfering, but close enough to document everything. As they passed through the glass doors, he spoke clearly. "Ma'am, what is your name?" he asked. Evelyn turned her head slightly. Evelyn Bird," she replied. "Miss Bird, I'll find you a lawyer. Don't say anything to these officers until your lawyer arrives. Do you understand?" he said. "Don't listen to him," Maddox shouted. "He's not your friend. He's trying to make your situation worse," he said, trying to manipulate Evelyn. "I understand," Evelyn said quietly to Red. They reached the police car. Maddox opened the back door with one hand while holding Evelyn's arm with the other. "Mind your head," he said with mock politeness, then shoved her into the seat so hard that Evelyn held her breath. They showed no mercy whatsoever. Red quickly went to his motorcycle. He needed his helmet camera. He had been wearing it during the ride but had taken it off when entering the bank. Now he took the helmet out of his motorcycle's saddlebag and turned on the camera attached to the side. The red recording light began to flash. He positioned himself so he could film the patrol car, the bank entrance, and the officers' faces. Maddox noticed this immediately. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked sternly. "Like I said, I'm recording," Red replied. He held his helmet steady, pointing the camera directly at him, to ensure a complete record of this interaction. "That's a helmet camera. These can be used for," said Maddox, "exactly what I'm using it for. To publicly document public officials performing their public duties," he said. Red's voice was calm, almost bored. "If you think I'm breaking the law, you can arrest me. But you should know that my bike club has lawyers who specialize in First Amendment cases. So ask yourself what you really want to do about this," she replied. Red was aware of her rights, and most importantly, she was never afraid. She was a strong woman. She was well aware of what she could do. Maddox looked at her, his face flushed with anger. But now he was calculating. He was weighing his options. And whatever conclusion he reached, it involved getting away from there. He knew very well what could happen to him if he interfered with Red. "This isn't over," said Maddox. "I hope it is," replied Red, "for your sake." Maddox slammed the patrol car door and walked toward the driver's seat. Harland followed him and shot a tense glance at Red's camera before getting into the passenger seat. The patrol car pulled away from the curb. Through the rear window, Red could see Evelyn's face, frightened, bewildered, humiliated. This upset Red greatly. He definitely wanted to help her. Red lowered his helmet and turned toward the bank. Tinker, Ghost, and Diesel had watched the whole thing from near the entrance. "That was awful," Tinker said quietly. "Yeah," Red agreed. "And it's not over yet," he said. He mentioned the pressure Evelyn might face at the police station. He took out his phone, his regular phone this time, and looked through his contacts. He had been with the Hells Angels for 22 years and had made connections during that time. Lawyers who owed him favors, activists fighting these battles, people who knew how to navigate the system when it broke down. He knew a lot of smart, good people. He found the number he was looking for. Samantha Wright, human rights lawyer, Hells Angels supporter, a good person. He thought she could help. After the phone rang twice, a professional voice answered. "Samantha Wright. Sam, it's Red. I just witnessed something at Stonebrook Federal Bank that you'll want to hear about," he said. This would catch her attention. Meanwhile, there was commotion at the bank. Inside the bank, Frank Dillard emerged from his office looking pleased. He approached Ryan Keller, who stood pale and shaken in front of the teller window. "Good work," Frank said quietly. "Just the kind of vigilance we need to protect our institution from fraud," he said. "But Mr. Dillard," Ryan said, his voice uncertain, "I checked his account. The money is there. It's all there. Documented savings going back 18 years. He wasn't trying to commit fraud. He wanted to continue." He was trying to withdraw an unreasonable amount of cash without proper documentation, Frank interrupted. That fits the pattern of money laundering or other illegal activities. We did everything by the book, he said. Frank believed he had done the right thing, but he would understand everything later. But we didn't. We just assumed, he said. We protected the bank's interests and the security of our customers. Frank's voice hardened. If you have a problem with that, Ryan, maybe you're not right for this institution, he threatened indirectly. In short, he wanted him to quit. Frank had used his position and power. Ryan remained silent, but it was clear from his expression that he was not convinced. He had seen Evelyn Bird's account. Every deposit was documented. Paychecks from the school district, small amounts saved regularly for nearly 20 years. Nothing suspicious, nothing illegal. Everything looked perfectly normal and legal. There was just an elderly woman trying to help her granddaughter. But Ryan Keller was 23 years old, and it had been 3 months since he started his first real job after college. He had student loans and rent to pay, and no savings to fall back on if he lost his job. So he nodded and said, "Yes, Mr. Dillard," turned back to his window, and tried not to think about the look on Evelyn Bird's face when the handcuffs went on. Even though he didn't want to, he had to do it. Otherwise, he would be in a very difficult financial situation. Outside, Red finished his phone call with Samantha Wright, who listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and promised to go straight to the police station. "What do we do now?" asked Ghost. "Now we follow him," said Red, pointing to where the police car had disappeared. "We need to make sure they really took him to the station," he said. "We need to make sure they didn't take him somewhere else," he said. "And we need to make some noise," he added. "What kind of noise?" asked Diesel. Red's expression hardened. "The kind that can be heard," he said. He got on his motorcycle, put on his helmet, the camera was still recording, and started the engine. The deep roar echoed off the bank's glass facade. Tinker, Ghost, and Diesel got on their own motorcycles. The 4 motorcycles followed the route the police car had taken and rode out of the Stonebrook Federal Bank parking lot in an orderly fashion. People on the sidewalk stopped to watch them. Car windows were rolled down. Phones were pulled out. The Hells Angels were riding by, and when the Hells Angels rode together, people noticed. Their engines were too loud. Red was counting on exactly that. Because Evelyn Bird had been treated as if she were insignificant, invisible, as if her dignity and rights were up for negotiation. This was never acceptable. And Red was going to make that change. Long ago, he had learned that the system did not protect everyone equally. That badges and institutional authority could be used as weapons against the vulnerable. He knew that remaining silent in the face of injustice was complicity, so he got on his motorcycle. And he documented everything. And he prepared to stir things up. Because an elderly woman who had spent 32 years raising children and saving money for her grandchild's future deserved better than handcuffs and humiliation. Red believed Evelyn deserved to be proud. That was true. If you were in Red's place, would you have done the same? What would your reaction have been? Red would make sure she got it. The motorcycles roared through the streets of Stonebrook, 4 riders in leather jackets heading for the police station where Evelyn Bird, a black woman, was being treated like a criminal for trying to access her own money. The day was bright and clear, the injustice was documented, and Red was just getting started. Harder things were to come. Events would take a completely different turn. The 2 police officers would have to pay for what they did. Evelyn Bird was released after sitting in a holding cell at the Stonebrook police station for 4 hours. For 4 hours she sat on a metal bench, her arthritic joints screaming in pain, her wrists turning purple from the handcuffs they finally removed, her dignity shattered. They took her purse, her cane, the folder containing her scholarship documents. They took her picture. They took her fingerprints. They asked her where she got the money, who she worked with, what her real intentions were. Evelyn had an answer for everything, but the officers just wouldn't believe her. Evelyn did what she knew was right, but at the same time, thinking about what Red had said, she didn't say anything more. Just like the woman in the motorcycle jacket had told her. "Don't say anything until your lawyer gets here." So she sat quietly, waited, and thought about her granddaughter, who should be celebrating her acceptance into college without wondering why her grandmother was being held at the bank. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, another officer, a young woman who at least had the courtesy not to look annoyed, opened the cell door. "Miss Bird, you may go. There are no charges against you at this time," she said. For now, as if they were doing her a favor, as if they might change their minds. Evelyn slowly got to her feet, every joint aching. "My things?" she asked. It mattered. "At the reception desk," replied the officer. She was led out of the police station, past officers who avoided her gaze, through a waiting room where a woman in smart business attire stood up immediately upon seeing her. "Ms. Bird, I'm Samantha Wright. I'm your lawyer, and I'm here to help you," she said. Samantha Wright was in her late 30s, black, with professionally styled natural hair and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a commanding navy suit and carried a leather bag that looked like it had seen many courtrooms. "I can't afford a lawyer," Evelyn said quietly. "You won't have to pay, a friend sent me." Samantha looked toward the entrance where Red stood, still wearing his Hell's Angels jacket, arms crossed, watching everything. They collected Evelyn's belongings from the reception desk. Her bag, her cane, her folder, everything was there except her dignity, which had been shattered and scattered on the bank floor 4 hours earlier. Red was doing everything he could for her. "Let's get out of here," Samantha said, offering her arm to support Evelyn. They stepped outside into the bright afternoon sunlight. Hell's Angels motorcycles were parked in a row across the street. It was an impossible to ignore presence, a statement. Red was standing next to his motorcycle and came over immediately when Evelyn emerged. "Mrs. Bird, how are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Tired," Evelyn replied honestly. "My head is spinning. I still don't understand what I did wrong," she answered. She was upset. She couldn't believe what had happened to her at the bank where she had gone to withdraw money for her grandson. "You didn't do anything wrong," Red said firmly. "We'll prove it," he assured her. Samantha led them to a quiet cafe 2 blocks away, a neutral place, public enough to be safe, quiet enough to talk. They sat at a corner table. Red ordered water for Evelyn and coffee for himself. Samantha took out a notebook. "Miss Bird, I want you to tell me everything that happened today. Starting from the moment you entered the bank," she said. Evelyn told her. Her voice trembled in parts as she described how Maddox had grabbed her wrists, how the handcuffs hurt, how she stumbled without her cane, and how no one helped her. But she recounted every detail, while Samantha took notes and Red listened with an expression that darkened by the minute. She continued like this. You could see in Red's eyes how angry he was. When Evelyn finished, Samantha put down her pen. "This is clearly a case of discrimination and wrongful arrest. You were targeted because of your race, period. The bank had no legitimate reason to call the police, and the police had no reasonable cause to arrest you," she replied. This was good. Her hands were strong. "But they arrested me," Evelyn said quietly. "They can do whatever they want," she said. "No," Samantha said firmly. "They can't, and we're going to prove it." She looked at Red. "Did you say there was video?" she asked. Red took out his phone and helmet. A partial phone video taken from inside the bank. A full helmet camera video taken from outside. Everything from the moment they took her out to the moment they drove away. The officers' faces, badge numbers, every word they said, he provided the evidence. This was a good sign. He connected the helmet camera to his phone and opened the footage. They silently watched Maddox shove Evelyn into the police car, make derisive comments about people like you, and Red calmly record everything while being threatened. "This is gold," said Samantha. "Exactly the kind of evidence we need. The officers' own words, their actions, all recorded. They can't deny it. With this information and evidence, they could do anything." Their innocence was clear. "What happens now?" asked Evelyn. "Now we'll file a civil rights lawsuit against the bank for discrimination and against the police department for wrongful arrest and civil rights violations." Samantha paused. "But I want you to understand something, Miss Bird. This will be difficult. They will fight back. They will try to discredit you, to quietly sweep this incident under the rug. Are you ready for that?" Evelyn was exhausted. She thought about sitting in that holding cell. She thought about the handcuffs on her arthritic wrists. She thought about Frank Dillard looking at her like she was trash. She thought about enduring 2 years of humiliation with a smile. She thought about all the negativity she had endured up to this point. This time it won't happen. A voice inside her said. She had to stand up strong. "I'm tired of keeping quiet," she said. "I'm tired of pretending I don't care. Yes, I'm ready," she replied with a clear, decisive answer. This time she was very determined. She definitely wanted everyone involved in this incident to be punished. Samantha smiled. "Good, because we're going to make some noise," she said. Over the next week, Evelyn's story spread quickly through the community. Everyone learned the details of what had happened. It began that Sunday at First Baptist Church. Pastor Henrietta Williams, who had been preaching for 30 years and had seen every kind of injustice her congregation had endured, asked Evelyn to tell her story. Evelyn stood at the pulpit with her cane, her voice stronger than it had been at the police station, and told her story. When she finished, the church was silent for exactly 3 seconds, followed by a 5-minute standing ovation. "This is not just Evelyn's struggle," Pastor Williams declared. "This is our struggle. How many of us have been treated this way? How many of us have swallowed our pride because we were afraid? I am no longer afraid. You should not be afraid either," she encouraged the people. "But everything must be done within the law," she added. The congregation organized. Within a few days they had a plan. Peaceful protests in front of Stonebrook Federal Bank, documenting other incidents of discrimination, Community meetings were held to share stories and create a record of patterns and practices, but everything was done lawfully and respectfully. Red and the Hells Angels attended every protest, not to cause trouble, but to bear witness. Their presence meant something. This wasn't just about an old woman, it was about a community standing together. And it meant that if the police decided to escalate the situation, there would be camera-wielding witnesses and lawyers on the speed dial. The media picked up the story on Wednesday. First, local news, a 2-minute segment on the evening broadcast. Then regional news. Then when the helmet camera footage leaked online, national news. The footage went viral. It was viewed 3 million times in 24 hours. By the weekend, it had been viewed 6 million times. The comment sections overflowed with anger, stories of similar experiences, and demands for accountability. Evelyn Bird became a household name, and that's when the retaliation began. From then on, they would come after Evelyn, and they would try to pressure her. It couldn't be any other way. On a sunny, bright Thursday afternoon, Officer Maddox and Harland arrived at Evelyn's house. When she heard the doorbell ring, Evelyn was inside preparing dinner. Heavy, authoritative. It was the kind of doorbell ring that didn't ask for permission. It was unsettling. When she opened the door, she saw both officers standing on the porch. This time, they weren't in uniform, but they were clearly armed, and their badges were visible on their belts. "Mrs. Bird," Maddox said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk." "I have a lawyer," Evelyn said, gripping her cane tightly. "You can tell him anything you want to say," she replied. "This is just friendly advice," Maddox continued. "We know about all this noise you're making, the protests, the media attention, the lawsuit. It's a big problem for everyone involved," he said. "I'm not causing trouble. I'm seeking justice," Evelyn replied. She spoke with great confidence. "That's the problem with justice," Harland interjected. "Sometimes it's like a double-edged sword. Sometimes when you investigate people's lives looking for problems, you find unexpected problems. In places you weren't looking," he implied. Evelyn had enough experience to understand this. The threat was clear. Evelyn felt her heart racing, but she kept her voice steady. "I have nothing to hide," she said. She showed she would not bow to their threat. "Everyone has something to hide, Ms. Bird," Maddox said. "Maybe you don't, but maybe your son, who was caught drunk driving 10 years ago, does. Maybe your grandson, who just got his license, does. Many things can happen on the road. There are many reasons for a traffic stop," he said, now threatening her through her family. They were trying everything. Evelyn's blood ran cold. They were threatening her family. "You should leave," she said. "We're just having a chat," Maddox replied. "We want you to know that dropping this case could be in everyone's best interest. Accept the settlement the bank is offering. Go quietly about your life," he said. "What if I don't?" Evelyn asked. "Then we'll see what happens," Maddox said. Leaning closer, he added, "You're 74 years old, Mrs. Bird. At that age, many things can happen. Falls, medical emergencies. Sometimes help doesn't arrive in time. It would be a shame." The roar of motorcycle engines tore through the afternoon air. 4 motorcycles pulled up to the curb in front of Evelyn's house. Red was in front, Tinker, Ghost, and Diesel right behind him. They turned off their engines and dismounted in a synchronized motion. Red walked toward the front yard, his boots thudding heavily on the concrete. "Good day, officers. Is there a problem?" he asked. Maddox's friendly expression vanished. "This is a private conversation," he replied. "On a public street, with the door open. It doesn't seem like a private conversation to me." Red stepped between the police and Evelyn. "Miss Bird, are you okay?" he asked. "They were leaving," said Evelyn, her voice stronger now that she was no longer alone. "Oh, really?" Maddox's hand moved toward his gun. "I thought we were having a conversation." "I thought you were threatening us," Red replied calmly. "As I recall, that's a crime, especially when police officers threaten the plaintiff in an active civil rights case." "You should be careful," said Maddox. "No, you should be careful, because there are 4 of us here, and we hear everything you say. And at least 2 of us are recording it." Red pointed to Tinker, who had raised his phone and pointed the camera at the officers. "So, if you have official police business with Miss Bird, make that clear. Otherwise, I suggest you leave," he said. Red was acting wisely every time, and this situation was irritating both police officers. Maddox and Harland looked at each other. They were calculating, weighing their options. Finally Maddox smiled, the same cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "See you, Miss Bird," he said. "You can be sure of that." They returned to their unmarked car and drove away slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone understood this wasn't over. After they left, Evelyn's knees nearly gave way. Red steadied her by holding her arm. "Let's go inside," Red said gently. They entered Evelyn's small sitting room. Tinker immediately scanned the room, checked the windows, noted the sight lines, a biker's security instinct. Ghost settled in a spot where he could see both the front door and the back entrance. Diesel stood by the window watching the street. They threatened my family, Evelyn said, collapsing into her chair. My son, my grandchild. I know, Red said. I heard it was recorded. What should I do? I can't put my family in danger. Red crouched down to Evelyn's eye level. Do you know what they're counting on? They're counting on you being scared and backing down. They've been getting away with this for years, scaring people into submission. But my granddaughter, she'll be protected. We'll make sure of it. Red took out his phone, called Samantha Wright, and put it on speaker. Sam, we have a problem. After Red explained the situation, Samantha's voice came through clear and professional. This is witness intimidation, and it's a federal crime. I'm going to file for a restraining order immediately, and I'm going to contact the FBI's Civil Rights Division. When local police engage in retaliation at this level, it becomes a federal matter. What about my family? Evelyn asked. We'll make this public. Once it's public, it will be much harder for them to carry out their threats without it looking like retaliation. I'll also reach out to some community organizations. We'll find people to watch your house, your son's house, to provide protection. And we'll be here too, Red added. We have a rotating schedule. Someone will always be nearby. I can't ask that of you, Evelyn protested. You're not asking, we're offering. Red's expression was firm. This is our job. We protect our own, and you're one of us now. Over the next few days, the community's response intensified. Church members organized watch schedules. Neighbors kept an eye on Evelyn's house and her son's house. The Hells Angels maintained a visible presence. Motorcycles were parked on the street. Riders strolled casually, making it clear that Evelyn Bird was not alone or unprotected. And true to her word, Samantha Wright went public. She held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. Evelyn stood beside her. Red stood quietly in the background to show support. Samantha detailed the threats, played recordings, and announced their demand for federal intervention. This isn't just about the wrongful arrest of a woman, Samantha told the cameras. This is about a series of harassment, intimidation, and retaliation by law enforcement officers who see themselves as above the law, but they are not above the law, and we will prove it. The story blew up again. National news covered it. Civil rights organizations issued statements. The Justice for Evelyn hashtag exploded on social media. Frank Dillard tried his own retaliation. He called Evelyn to inform her that her account would be closed due to suspicious activity. Samantha obtained a preliminary injunction within hours. A judge issued a temporary restraining order preventing the bank from closing the account and ordered an investigation into the bank's practices. Everyone involved in Evelyn's humiliation was in trouble. And throughout this whole process, Evelyn remained steadfast. Not because she was fearless, she was very afraid, but she was tired. Tired of staying silent. Tired of being invisible. Tired of powerful people making her feel small. She was 74 years old. For 32 years, she had served meals to children with a smile. She had raised a family. For 18 years, she had saved every penny, and she was tired of being treated as if she didn't matter. On Sunday, exactly 2 weeks after her arrest, Evelyn was back at church. Pastor Williams called her to the pulpit. Sister Evelyn has something to say, the pastor announced. Evelyn slowly walked forward, tapping her cane on the wooden floor. She looked at the congregation, faces she had known for decades, people who stood with her, prayed with her, fought with her. I was scared, she said simply. When those police officers came to my house and threatened my family, I was ready to give up. I was ready to accept whatever deal they offered and go back to being quiet. The church was silent. But then I thought of my granddaughter. I thought about the example I was setting for her. I thought about the world I was leaving her. Evelyn's voice grew stronger. And I decided that it was okay to be afraid. But to let that fear condemn me to silence, that is no longer okay. Amen, someone shouted. That's why I'm not backing down. I'm not settling for silence. I'm going to stand up and tell my story, and I'm going to hold them accountable. She paused. And I'm not doing this alone. You're all here. I have my lawyer. I have bikers who are there for me when I need them. Even people I've never met are sending messages of support. The congregation stood and applauded. They wanted me to be silent and invisible, Evelyn said above the noise. But I don't want to be invisible anymore. The applause continued. Red, sitting in the back row. The Hells Angels had started attending the services to provide security, nodded in agreement. Outside, the media had set up their cameras. The story went beyond Stonebrook, a town's police department, and a bank's discrimination. It was becoming a symbol, and at 74 years old, arthritic and cane-wielding, Evelyn Bird was at the center of it. Not because she wanted it, because she had decided that silence was more dangerous than speaking out, and that decision was about to change everything. The federal courthouse in downtown Stonebrook was built in 1927, constructed entirely of granite and marble, and designed with an architecture meant to inspire respect for the law. 3 months after Evelyn Bird's arrest, on a bright Monday morning in November, the courtroom was packed. The civil rights case had moved quickly. This was partly due to media interest, partly because the evidence was so clear, and partly because Judge William Thornton had gained a reputation for showing no tolerance for corporate power abuse. Evelyn sat at the plaintiff's table with Samantha Wright. Behind them, in the gallery, were members of the First Baptist Church congregation, neighbors, supporters following the case, and in the back row, Red and 3 other Hells Angels members, Tinker, Ghost, and a new member named Razor, a quiet man with gentle eyes who had joined the rotating security detail. Across the aisle, the defendants sat with their attorneys. Frank Dillard wore an expensive suit and looked uncomfortable being there. Maddox and Harland, in their official uniforms, tried to project authority and justice. Representatives from the Stonebrook Federal Bank's corporate office had been brought in to minimize the damage. Judge William Thornton entered at exactly 9 o'clock. In his late 60s, African-American, he had been a judge for 40 years and was known for his meticulous fairness and zero tolerance for discrimination under the guise of procedure. "All rise," the court clerk announced. Everyone stood. Judge Thornton sat down and scanned the courtroom with eyes that had seen every injustice imaginable. "Sit down." There was a natural authority in his voice. "We are here to hear the case of Bird v. Stonebrook Federal Bank and the Stonebrook Police Department. This is a civil rights case involving allegations of discrimination, wrongful arrest, and retaliation. Counsel, are we ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," said Samantha. "Yes, Your Honor," replied the bank's lawyer, Gerald Crawford, a man who specialized in quietly dismissing discrimination cases. "Then let's begin. Ms. Wright, make your opening statement." Samantha stood up and buttoned her jacket. She walked toward the witness stand. The 12 citizens of varying ages and backgrounds who would decide this case. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case concerns a 74-year-old woman who served meals to children in school cafeterias for 32 years. A woman who saved every penny for 18 years to help her granddaughter go to college. A woman who went to her bank on Friday morning to withdraw her own money and was treated like a criminal because of the color of her skin." He paused for a moment and made eye contact with each juror. "The evidence will show that Evelyn Bird was targeted by bank employees solely because she is black. The police were called not because of legitimate suspicious activity, but because bank manager Frank Dillard couldn't conceive that a black woman in her 70s could legitimately have $4,000 in savings. Officers Maddox and Harland arrested her without reasonable cause, humiliated her in public, and then tried to intimidate her into dropping the case." Samantha pointed to the defense table. "They will tell you they followed procedures, that they were protecting the bank's interests, that the arrest was justified. But the evidence, including video footage from multiple sources, will show you the truth. This was blatant and clear discrimination. Ms. Bird is here today to ensure this never happens to anyone else." She sat down. Crawford stood up for the defense. "Your Honor, members of the jury, this case involves a bank that applied protocols established for large cash withdrawals and police officers who acted on a legitimate tip about suspicious activity. Ms. Bird experienced discomfort. Yes, but discomfort is not discrimination. Enforcing security procedures is not racism. The defense will show that every measure taken was justified, reasonable, and within established rules." Judge Thornton took notes. "Thank you, counsel. Ms. Wright, call your first witness." The plaintiff calls Ms. Evelyn Bird. Evelyn slowly stood up, supported by her cane, and walked toward the witness stand. The court clerk administered the oath, and she sat down in the chair, hands clasped in her lap, maintaining a dignified posture despite her apparent tension. Samantha approached gently. "Ms. Bird, please tell the court about your work history." "I worked in the Stonebrook School District for 32 years, said Evelyn, her voice quiet but firm. "In the cafeterias. I served meals to the children, cleaned, helped in the kitchen. I started when I was 42. I retired at 74, actually this year." "Well, during those 32 years, were you ever accused of any crime, theft, fraud?" "No, ma'am, never." "Tell us about your account at Stonebrook Federal Bank." Evelyn explained that she had opened a special savings account 18 years ago for her grandchild's education. She explained that she regularly deposited small amounts from each paycheck, sometimes only $20 or $30. She explained that she saved birthday money, Christmas bonuses, and small inheritances. She explained that the money grew slowly but steadily to just over $4,000. "It's all documented," Samantha added. "Every deposit is recorded. Every penny is accounted for. Your Honor, I would like to submit Mrs. Bird's bank statements for the last 18 years as evidence." "Objection," Crawford said. "Is it relevant?" "Your Honor, The defense will argue that this is a suspicious transaction. These statements prove 18 years of documented legal deposits. It is highly relevant to whether those suspicions are justified. Overruled. The statements are admitted. Samantha recounted her morning at the bank to Evelyn. Every detail. How she reacted to Ryan Keller's request to withdraw money. How Frank Dillard approached her and said, "People like you." How they made her wait while they called the police. How officers Maddox and Harland arrested her without explanation. How the handcuffs hurt her arthritic wrists. How she was paraded around the bank like a criminal. When Evelyn finished her account, several jurors were visibly moved. An elderly woman was wiping her eyes. "Miss Bird, how did this arrest make you feel?" Objection. It requires speculation about emotional state. Your Honor, the plaintiff's emotional state is central to the damages, Samantha objected. Overruled. Miss Bird, you may respond. Evelyn looked at the jury. I felt ashamed. I felt degraded. As if everything I had worked for my entire life was worthless because of the color of my skin. As if I was not worthy of basic respect and dignity. As if being black meant I was guilty until proven innocent, and perhaps even then. The courtroom was silent. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Crawford stood up for cross-examination. Miss Bird, is it true that large cash withdrawals could be indicative of illegal activity? It could be, Evelyn said carefully. So the bank was just following reasonable security protocols? No, sir. Because they didn't ask me any questions. They just assumed I had done something wrong. But you understand the bank has an obligation to prevent fraud and money laundering, correct? I understand they have an obligation to treat all customers with equal respect, but they didn't do that. Crawford tried a few more angles, but Evelyn was resolute. She was polite, dignified, and unshakable. When she finally sat down, it was clear that he hadn't landed a single effective blow. The plaintiff is calling Red. Samantha paused. What is your legal name for the record? Red stood up. Rebecca Brennan. She walked to the witness stand, still wearing her clean black shirt under her Hells Angels jacket. A compromise between respect for the court and protecting her identity. Ms. Brennan, please describe the events you witnessed at Stonebrook Federal Bank on September 23rd. Red recounted. Clearly, precisely, without exaggeration, that she saw the police approaching Evelyn from the window, that she entered the bank and witnessed the arrest, that Maddox, despite his age and arthritis, grabbed Evelyn roughly, that she was threatened for recording it. What did you do after the arrest? I followed them to the station to make sure Ms. Bird was actually taken there and not somewhere else. I contacted attorney Samantha Wright, and I provided all the video footage I had taken to support Ms. Bird's case. Your Honor, I would now like to show that video footage. The courtroom lights dimmed. A screen was lowered, and for the next 8 minutes the jury watched footage from Red's helmet camera. The footage was devastating. Maddox's face, clear and recognizable, was pushing Evelyn toward the police car. His voice was perfectly recorded. Back off, Grandma. You'll learn what happens when people like you try to scam us. Evelyn's trembling but dignified response. I'm not scamming you. The money is mine. Maddox's threat. Yeah, we'll see about that after we search your house and run your name through the system. Red's calm intervention and Maddox's threats directed at him. The entire interaction was recorded in high definition, impossible to deny or reinterpret. When the lights came on, the jurors' expressions ranged from shock to anger. 2 jurors looked at Maddox with obvious disgust. Crawford cross-examined Red, trying to imply that he had ulterior motives, that the Hells Angels were trying to cause trouble, that the recording was somehow illegal. Miss Brennan, isn't it true that motorcycle clubs generally have hostile relations with law enforcement? Some do, Red said calmly. However, whether you ride a motorcycle or not, it is every citizen's right to record police officers performing their public duties. I was simply documenting what I saw. And you just happen to have a helmet camera. I always ride with a helmet camera for safety and insurance purposes. It's a common practice among motorcycle riders. How convenient. Yes, Red agreed. It was convenient. Now, instead of conflicting accounts, there is indisputable evidence showing what actually happened. Crawford sat down, having accomplished nothing but making the video evidence even more damning. Over the next 2 days, Samantha called more witnesses. Young bank clerk Ryan Keller reluctantly stated that he had checked Evelyn's account and found nothing suspicious. Frank Dillard had told him to call the police anyway. He said he felt uncomfortable but followed orders. Did you call the police because Mrs. Bird's transaction was truly suspicious? Or because Mr. Dillard told you to? Ryan looked unhappy. Mr. Dillard told me to. Another bank employee, an elderly woman named Patricia, stated that she had seen Frank Dillard make similar assumptions about other black customers. He would watch them more closely. He would question their transactions more aggressively. I saw him refuse to cash a black customer's check because it looked suspicious, but it was a paycheck like the others. This pattern was clearly emerging. This was not an isolated incident. This was how Stonebrook Federal Bank operated. The defense called Frank Dillard. He was polite and professional. He denied any racial bias. He claimed he was only following bank security protocols. He insisted that calling the police was justified due to indicators of suspicious activity. "What kind of indicators?" Samantha asked during cross-examination. "Large cash withdrawals, nervous behavior, inability to produce identification quickly. Miss Bird has arthritis, which makes it difficult for her to retrieve items from her purse." "Did you interpret a physical disability as suspicious behavior?" "I interpreted all the circumstances as a situation requiring additional verification. Even though your own employee stated that she had 18 years of documented deposits, did you request additional verification from the police instead of simply verifying her account?" Frank's professional demeanor faltered slightly. "We have a protocol, yes, you mentioned protocols. But according to your own employee's statement, these protocols seem to apply only to black customers." "That's not true. I have no further questions." Officers Maddox and Harland took the witness stand. They claimed they had reasonable cause. They said Evelyn was uncooperative. They said the arrest was justified based on the bank's report, but the video contradicted everything they said. During cross-examination, Samantha replayed the video and paused it at the moment Maddox said, "People like you." "Officer Maddox, what did you mean when you said people like you? People trying to commit fraud, not black people?" "No, then why didn't you say people committing fraud? Why did you say people like you while looking at a 74-year-old black woman?" Maddox had no good answer. The trial lasted 6 days. The closing arguments were very compelling. Samantha stood before the jury one last time. "The evidence is clear. Ms. Bird was targeted because of her race. She was arrested without reasonable cause. When she sought justice, she was humiliated, threatened, and then intimidated. The defense wants you to believe that all of this was just procedure, that the rules were followed. However, rules applied selectively based on race are not rules. They are racism dressed up as professionalism." He paused for a moment. "Ms. Bird wants justice, not revenge, not some illogical gain. Just acknowledgement of the harm done to her and accountability for those who did it. That's all. Give her that justice." Crawford's closing argument was professional but hollow. Mistakes may have been made, but the intentions were good. This wasn't discrimination. This was security. This was logical. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the jury foreman, a middle-aged black woman who had been a teacher for 20 years, stood and read the verdict in a clear, firm voice. "In the case of Bird v. Stonebrook Federal Bank and Stonebrook Police Department, we find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts." The courtroom erupted in controlled celebration. Judge Thornton allowed the celebration to continue for exactly 10 seconds before banging his gavel. Silence. "We still have damages to address." The jury awarded Evelyn $1.5 million in damages. $1 million against the police department for wrongful arrest, civil rights violations and intimidation. $500,000 against the bank for discrimination. But Judge Thornton wasn't finished yet. "I also order the following measures," he said, his authoritative voice silencing the courtroom. "Frank Dillard will be immediately terminated and barred from holding management positions in financial institutions for 7 years. Officers Maddox and Harland will be suspended without pay until the federal civil rights investigation is complete, and upon my recommendation, permanently removed from law enforcement. The Stonebrook Police Department will conduct a comprehensive review of all complaints filed over the past 5 years. The Stonebrook Federal Bank will be fined $250,000 and will initiate an anti-bias training program with independent audits every 3 months." He looked at the defendants. "Let this decision serve as an example to remind us that justice belongs to every citizen, regardless of age, race, or social status. This court will not tolerate any abuse of authority or discrimination." He banged his gavel hard. "The verdict is in. The court is adjourned." There was a moment of silence. Then the courtroom erupted in applause. Evelyn sat down, tears streaming down her face. Samantha squeezed her hand. Red, sitting in the back, nodded quietly with satisfaction. The media was waiting on the steps of the courthouse. Evelyn stood beside Samantha, while Red stood a little behind them, a silent supporter. "I didn't want to go to court," Evelyn told the cameras. "I just wanted to help my granddaughter go to college. But when they put the handcuffs on me, something inside me broke. Not just my heart, but the part of me that always stayed silent." Her voice grew stronger. "This victory isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's afraid to speak up. For everyone who's told to know their place. Today, the court said my place is right here, equal before the law, deserving of respect, and brave enough to demand it." The crowd behind her erupted in applause again. As cameras flashed and reporters asked questions, Evelyn felt a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The bruises on her wrists had long since faded, but deeper wounds were only now beginning to heal. 3 weeks after the verdict, Evelyn Bird entered Stonebrook Federal Bank for the first time since her arrest. She didn't need to. The settlement money had been deposited into the account of another bank that had reached out specifically to do business with her after seeing the news. But Samantha had suggested this visit, and Evelyn understood why. It was about reclaiming her place. It was about walking through those doors with her head held high, rather than remembering the moment she was let out in handcuffs. Red accompanied her, along with Tinker. Not for protection, the legal battle was over and won, but for moral support. And perhaps Red admitted to himself because he wanted to see the look on the faces of the employees who had watched Evelyn's humiliation and done nothing. The glass doors slid open softly, just as they had that September morning. The bank looked exactly the same marble floors, the same teller windows, the same arrangement of chairs in the waiting room. But everything was different. The new manager, a woman named Jennifer Martinez, brought in from corporate headquarters to clean up the mess, came right over. She was in her 40s, a professional woman, and extended her hand with genuine warmth. "Miss Bird, I'm so glad you came. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk." Evelyn shook her hand. "Miss Martinez, please call me Jennifer. I want you to know that we have implemented all the reforms mandated by the court, and even more. Every employee has undergone comprehensive bias training. We have reviewed our policies regarding major transactions. We have established an anonymous reporting system for discriminatory behavior." She paused for a moment. "I know this doesn't make up for what happened to you, but we are determined to ensure this never happens to anyone else." "Words are easy," Red said quietly. "Actions matter." "You're absolutely right," Jennifer agreed. "That's why, if you'd like, I'd like to show you what we've actually done." She walked them through the bank explaining the changes. New training materials, revised protocols that prioritized customer service over suspicion, a diversity committee made up of employees and community members, partnerships with local churches and community organizations to rebuild trust. "We also let go of 3 employees, including Frank Dillard," Jennifer said. "Individuals documented with patterns of discriminatory behavior that emerged during the investigation." "Good," Evelyn said simply. They stopped in front of the cash registers. Ryan Keller was there, and his face fell when he saw Evelyn. "Miss Bird," he said, rising from his seat. "I should apologize. I should have questioned what Mr. Dillard told me. I should have defended you. I'm sorry." Evelyn studied him for a long moment. He was young, still learning, still figuring out when to follow orders and when to follow his conscience. "Thank you for your apology," she said finally, "and for your testimony at the hearing. That took courage." Ryan nodded, relief evident on his face. "I learned something from what happened. When to raise my voice. I won't make the same mistake again." They finished their visit and left. Outside, on the sidewalk, Evelyn stood in the bright November sun and took a deep breath. "How do you feel?" Red asked. "Like I've gotten something back that was stolen from me," Evelyn said. "Like that building no longer has any power over me." "Good." They walked to where the motorcycles were parked. Red had come with Tinker, and they would take her home after she gathered her thoughts. "Red," Evelyn said, "I wanted to ask you, why did you help me? You didn't know me. You had no reason to get involved." Red was silent for a moment, leaning against his motorcycle. 22 years ago, I was riding on my boyfriend's motorcycle. We were pulled over because our taillight was broken. The cop was aggressive, looking for a reason to escalate things. My boyfriend stayed calm, did everything right, but the cop wanted trouble and found an excuse to arrest him. He paused, looked up at the sky. I started screaming, tried to record it with my phone. This was before everyone had cameras everywhere. The cop threatened to arrest me too. We spent the night in jail. The charges were eventually dropped, but the message was clear. They could do whatever they wanted, and we couldn't stop them. "What changed?" Evelyn asked. "I got my own motorcycle. I got my badge. I learned about the club's lawyers, resources, and the power that comes from standing together. And I decided that if I ever saw someone treated like us again, I would do something about it." Red looked at Evelyn. "So when I saw those cops coming toward you from the window, I didn't think. I just acted." "I'm glad you did." "Me too." That afternoon, Evelyn visited her granddaughter, who attended the state university 2 hours away. Red and Tinker accompanied her, not because they had to, but because they were friends, and friends look out for each other. The campus was beautiful, old brick buildings and new glass structures, trees. Evelyn felt her chest swell with pride when they arrived at the dorm where her granddaughter lived. Jasmine Bird, named after her great-grandmother, ran out to greet them. 18 years old, a full scholarship student, studying engineering. Smart and kind, she was everything Evelyn hoped she would be. "Grandma," she hugged her, mindful of Evelyn's arthritis. "You came." "Of course I came, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss seeing where you live." Jasmine noticed Red and Tinker. "Are these the bikers from the news?" "These are Red and Tinker," Evelyn introduced them. "Friends who help me when I need it." Jasmine shook their hands warmly. "Thank you for everything you've done for my grandmother. She did the hard part," said Red. "We just witnessed and supported." They toured the campus. Jasmine showed them her dorm room, small but cozy, decorated with family photos and inspirational quotes. The engineering lab, equipped with gear Evelyn didn't understand but still admired. The library where she worked. "The housing deposit you're trying to get," Jasmine said quietly as they walked. "I told you I could get a student loan, work more, find another way, and I told you I'd been saving money for 18 years so you wouldn't have to do that," Evelyn replied. "That was always the plan, baby. What happened at the bank wasn't about the money. They decided I didn't deserve it." "But you did," said Jasmine. "You stood up and you won." "We won," corrected Evelyn. "Me, Samantha, Red, the church, and everyone who wouldn't let them sweep this under the rug." They sat on a bench in the campus courtyard, watching the students pass by. Evelyn thought about the money she had saved over the years, the small sacrifices she had made, all the dreams she had built for this moment. "I'm proud of you," she said to her granddaughter. "Not just for coming here, but for how you handled everything. You never asked me to drop the case. You never suggested I settle and move on with my life, because that would have been wrong," Jasmine said simply. "They hurt you. They needed to take responsibility." "Yes," Evelyn agreed. "It would have." Changes continued at Stonebrook. A comprehensive review of the police department uncovered a series of problematic behaviors that extended beyond Maddox and Harland. 17 officers were disciplined, 5 were fired. The entire department underwent retraining. Maddox and Harland were tried in federal court on charges of civil rights violations and witness intimidation. Both accepted plea deals rather than go to trial. Maddox received 3 years in federal prison and was permanently barred from law enforcement. Harland received 2 years in prison and the same permanent bar. The sentences were announced on a cold December morning. Evelyn attended the hearing with Samantha and Red. She wanted to see it through to the end. When Maddox was led out in handcuffs identical to the ones Evelyn had worn on her arthritic wrists, he somehow looked smaller. He had shrunk. Her confidence was gone, replaced by the reality of the outcome. She walked past him without looking at Evelyn. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked her how she felt. "Justice has been served," Evelyn said. "Not just for me, but for anyone those officers might target in the future. They can't hurt anyone anymore. That's important." Frank Dillard had moved to another state, trying to rebuild his career at a smaller bank, but his 7-year ban from management positions followed him. The last Evelyn heard, he was working as a regular teller, learning what it felt like to be on the other side of the counter. The reforms at Stonebrook Federal Bank were working. Customer complaints decreased. Employee morale was up. The diversity committee implemented changes that made the bank truly welcoming to all customers. Jennifer Martinez sent Evelyn a handwritten note every month, updating her on progress and thanking her for pushing for changes that should have happened years ago. Spring arrived at Stonebrook with warm sunshine and blossoming trees. 6 months after the decision was made, in April, First Baptist Church held a celebration. They called it Justice Market, and the hall was packed. Pastor Henrietta Williams invited Evelyn to speak. Evelyn walked to the podium with her cane and looked at the faces she had known for decades, and the new faces she was meeting. These people had joined the church after hearing her story, wanting to be part of a community that stood up for something. "I was asked what I learned from all this," said Evelyn, "and I think the most important thing is that staying silent doesn't keep you safe. I spent most of my life keeping my head down, not making waves, accepting disrespect with a smile, because I thought I had to do that to survive." She paused for a moment, clutching the podium. But staying silent allows injustice to continue. It makes powerful people think they can do anything and get away with it. It diminishes you, almost to the point of disappearing. "Preach," someone shouted. "So I learned that raising your voice is scary but necessary. Justice is possible, but only if people are willing to fight for it. You can't do it alone. You need a community, witnesses, people like Red, who take action when they see something wrong." Red, sitting in his usual spot in the back row, nodded slightly. "And I learned that I am stronger than I thought," Evelyn concluded. "We all are. We just have to believe it." The congregation stood and applauded for 5 minutes. After the service, there was a potluck in the church hall. Evelyn sat at a table, surrounded by friends, ate food she didn't have to prepare for once, laughed at stories, and felt lighter than she had in years. She stopped by Red's table. "I'm leaving. I'll be hitting the road early tomorrow." "Thanks for coming," Evelyn said. "For everything." "You're family now," Red said simply. "This will last forever." They hugged, an elderly black woman and a white biker who had become friends under the most unexpected circumstances. In May, Evelyn received an invitation. The state university was holding a scholarship awards ceremony, and Jasmine was to receive the Engineering Excellence Award. They wanted Evelyn to present the award. She went to the university again. This time her son drove her, with Red and 2 other Hells Angels members escorting them, because that was their job now. The ceremony took place in a beautiful auditorium. Evelyn sat on stage with university officials and scholarship donors, feeling like a stranger but proud. Jasmine, the dean of the engineering faculty, told Jasmine's story, her academic achievements, community service, dedication. Then she told Evelyn's story. This young woman's grandmother fought a battle this year, not related to education, but related to justice. And in doing so, she showed her granddaughter what it means to stand up for what is right, no matter the cost. Mrs. Bird, would you please come forward? Evelyn walked toward the podium with her cane. Jasmine joined her, and Evelyn extended the award certificate to her with slightly trembling hands. I'm proud of you, Evelyn whispered. I'm proud of you too, Grandma, Jasmine whispered back. As the hall applauded, they embraced each other. Flashes went off. Evelyn thought of that September morning when she wanted to withdraw money to help her granddaughter, and how everything had changed since that day. A hot and bright summer arrived. One Saturday in June, exactly 9 months after her arrest, Evelyn organized a community gathering at Riverside Park. This park, the park where she had sat peacefully, tables were laden with food, children played in the playground, families had spread blankets on the grass, and in the middle of it all, a small plaque was unveiled. The plaque read, "With gratitude to Evelyn Bird, and all who fight for justice, dignity, and equality. May this space always be open to all, and may we never forget the importance of raising our voices." The mayor was there too, looking uncomfortable, but saying the right things about reform and accountability. The new police chief was there, trying to rebuild trust. Jennifer Martinez from the bank was there with a corporate donation to help maintain the park. And Red was there with a dozen Hells Angels members, providing informal security and reminding everyone that the community was watching. Pastor Williams blessed the plaque. Evelyn said a few words about hope and perseverance. The children played fearlessly. As the sun began to set and families gathered their picnic things, Red found Evelyn sitting on a bench watching everything. "How are you?" Red asked, sitting down beside her. "I'm fine," Evelyn said. "I'm really fine." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the park empty as dusk approached. "You change things," Red said. "Not just for you, for everyone who comes after you." The park ranger program the police started, the program that trains officers in de-escalation and community engagement, happened because of your case. The banking reforms that spread to other branches happened because of you. The 17 families who approached Samantha about their own discrimination cases found the courage because you showed them it was possible. "We changed things," Evelyn corrected. "You, me, Samantha, the church, and everyone who refused to stay silent." "Yes," Red agreed. "We changed things." Evelyn looked at the plaque glistening in the fading sunlight. "You know what's funny? All I ever wanted was to help my granddaughter go to college. That was my only goal. And I did it. There she is. Going to be successful, going to do wonderful things." "But," Red asked, "but in the process I discovered I could do more than I thought I could. I could stand up to powerful people. I could resist. I could change things." Evelyn smiled. "For 74 years I kept quiet, I conformed, and I swallowed my pride. And now, at 75, I'm finally learning what I can really do." "So what happens now?" Red asked. Samantha said a task force has been set up for statewide police reform. They're looking for community representatives. Maybe I'll join." Evelyn shrugged. "Or I could just enjoy my granddaughter's success and hand the torch over to others for a while. I haven't decided yet. Either way, you've earned it." They sat in the park until no one else remained but themselves, and a member of the Hells Angels. Ghost stood at a respectful distance, ensuring they returned safely to their vehicles. "Are you ready?" Red asked. "I'm ready," Evelyn confirmed. They stood up. Red extended his arm and Evelyn took it, making her way with the young woman's assistance to where their vehicles were parked. Behind them, the plaque caught the last rays of the day's sun. "To Evelyn Bird and all who stand for justice, with gratitude." A 74-year-old grandmother who wanted to withdraw money for her grandchild's education, arrested and found guilty because she was black at the bank, refused to stay silent. She stood up, fought, and won. Not just for herself, but for everyone told to stay small, quiet, and invisible. She proved it was wrong, and in doing so she changed not just her own life but more. She changed the rules.